it was an interesting time that like around 99, 2000, when I started, I got my first article published, starting to take photos, and Chris was making a huge dent in the surf world with his films at that time, along with Thomas Campbell and Kidman, was kind of changing the surf industry on how films were made. And so Chris around that time was neck deep in all his stuff, and Keith moved into a house near the Chouinards in Ventura, and he became kind of friendly with Yvon, and so they were kind of becoming friends a little bit. Him and Dan, I think, did a climb with Yvon back in the day. They're neighbors, kind of hanging out. And this, I get this call out of the blue. I get this call, and so is this Jeff Johnson? Yeah, and he goes, Yvon Chouinard, and I was like, oh my God. Chris Malloy, like full. It didn't sound like Chris, but I'm all, Chris is like fucking with me right now. Like he's got somebody acting like Yvon Chouinard, and like, I'm like, oh hey Yvon, how are you? Like, who the fuck is this? And he's like, well, yeah, I'm doing a surf trip coming up, and I was just wondering if you want to maybe come with us and take some photos and write a story. And I was like, holy shit, this is Yvon Chouinard calling me, and weird, your biggest hero, one of your biggest heroes gives you a call, and so he wanted to do a trip down to the Tuamotus. He's doing with a bunch of his friends and stuff, and he just said, yeah, you want to come along and take some photos? And sure, I made sure I had the time to do that. And so I called Yvon and I said, hey, you want to go down to this pearl farm and live on the pearl farm before we do the surf trip? Just go hang out there. And he's like, yeah, I'm game. Yvon and I go down there, and we just really get to know each other on this trip. We're living in a plywood shack, just a really simple plywood shack, and we're literally going to work every day on this pearl farm, and it's hard work. You go out there and you're diving for pearls. You're going down, it's not super deep, but maybe 20, 25 feet deep, and you're grabbing strings of pearls and bringing it up to the divers on the boats, and it's hard work. And Yvon was probably he had to be in his mid 60s at that point, and he was tough as nails and loved it, and so we kind of hit it off. And that, it's one of those things where, you don't always want to meet your heroes, it's more often than not, it's a letdown. And he was cooler than I thought he was going to be. He was everything that I would imagine and more, it was really understated. You had to dig stories out of him, and he's got the craziest stories, but he just doesn't offer them up. You got to kind of dig at him. And so anyways, we did that. And so we really got comfortable with each other. It's like, okay, that was a cool thing that we did. Now we're going to go on a surf trip. And we went on a trip to the northern Tuamotus on a boat, and a bunch of his friends. It was mostly older guys. Then he brought his son Fletcher with him. And me and Fletcher were probably the youngest guys there. It's kind of more of an older crew. And on that trip, Fletcher tells me, and I think Yvon was sitting there too, he goes, hey, we're gonna launch Patagonia Surf again. And I was all ears, because I've been such a fan, but I've seen it, I've been watching it for the beginning, since they started putting ads in the Surfers Journal since the early 90s. And they'd done the surf thing, they'd tried like 3 or 4 times and failed. And Fletcher was telling me what they're gonna do, and I was like, holy shit, they're just gonna fail again. Like they're doing the same exact thing that they did through those other ones, and it didn't work. And just my opinion was like, this isn't going to work, How was it wrong? They've tried it before with, Sean Thompson was there, incredible, right? He finally just gave up, and he tried his best, and it didn't stick. So I've been watching this. Because I was such a fan of Patagonia and what they're doing, such a fan of Surfers Journal, I just see their ads, and I'd see every ad. And to me, their ads didn't seem like they're really Patagonia. They were trying to do kind of something different, And so in my opinion, basically he said, we're going to hire Tom Curran, And I was thinking, well, fuck, Tom Curran's, we all know, is one of the greatest surfers that's ever lived, but he's not going to run your whole surf thing, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it just sounded like another Sean Thompson, and they're a great person, great guy, but you need a whole crew. It takes more of a push than just putting a guy at a desk at Patagonia, as far as I was, in my opinion. But so anyways, I listened to that and I just kind of tucked it away, but I was really intrigued by that. Like, wow, they're really going to go for it again. And man, I just don't know. So Yvon at the time saw a photo on a shirt and he goes, "Is that your photo?" And Banana Republic ran a photo of one of my photos or whatever. And he goes, "Oh, that's so cool." He said, "Why don't you come and do that at Patagonia? You know, why don't you come do some of your photos?" So, okay. So Yvon, made plans for me to come out there and visit Patagonia. So I flew out there, got in my little van that I keep up in San Francisco, drove down there, and I parked it at Keith's house, which is like right across the street from Yvon's house. And I hooked up with Yvon, and he made the connections for me to go in there and go talk to the t-shirt guy. So I basically slept in my van in front of Keith's house for like a week. And I would have coffee or tea with Yvon every morning. They live right on the beach there. And I'd go in there and we'd just have our mornings, just shooting the shit, whatever, just reading magazines and talking about stuff. He just became a good friend, And, but in the middle of the day, I would go down there with and I just cruise around Patagonia and just talk to people. Cause I knew they were gonna launch this thing. And I was interested in what was going on there. Cause I'm such a fan. And now I'm like, got a pass. I'm meeting these people and I don't know what they thought of me or who is this guy, but I got to know who was going to be involved in this thing and who was what, who was who. And so I started kind of formulating kind of some ideas in my head about how the Malloys could get in here and make shit happen, And there'd already been something brewing already with Keith living near Yvon, and Chris had already, Chris went to Antarctica and wore a bunch of Patagonia gear, and he's a fan. And so there's something brewing already. And I know they did talk to Evan Slater about doing something. And so there was something kind of brewing, but it wasn't really going anywhere. So I started kind of putting I had like plan A and plan B, how I thought the Malloys in Patagonia could work. And Chris at this point was right downtown, and Chris was just real deep in his filmmaking. He had a what was it called? It was a Woodshed Film.
Oh yeah, Woodshed.
Woodshed Films at that point, and it was just this little house downtown. And at that time, he was making Broke Down Melody, I think. And he had a little office there, and Carla was working there and stuff. And I went over there one day to talk to Chris, and I told him, hey, I've been like snooping around Patagonia and hanging out there for like a week. And I just told him what's going on. Like, they're going to launch this thing and I don't think it's going to work and blah, blah, blah. And Chris, I don't even know if Chris was thinking about it, but I go, I think there's something here, And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, it'd be the perfect marriage. Like, you guys, you make films, the three brothers are like a force in the surf industry, and they did, they've been with Bob Hurley forever. And I knew they were kind of, I think Hurley just sold to Nike at that point. And I think the Malloys were getting a little burnout on the surf industry, and I knew they were kind of looking for something different, and Chris is doing his films and Keith and Dan had just made the tour. I think Keith just got on the actual tour, but then quit or got injured or something, but they're traveling and stuff. But so I go, I think this could be something cool, like, what do you think? And Chris is like, wow, you could just see his face light up with all these ideas. And I go, can I push forward on this and kind of mention it and like talk on your behalf? And Chris doesn't really like people. He's the ringleader of the brothers. He doesn't like people talking on his behalf, but it was cool. He was just like, yeah, I would be into that. That could be cool. And I go, okay, I'll just see how, I don't know, maybe I'll mention it to somebody. So it's like the next day or the day after, I'm sitting there having my morning with Yvon, and there's this guy there. And I was kind of mentioning things to Yvon a little bit, like kind of my opinions about something. Nothing important. Like, he's just like, oh, what do you think about this and that or whatever? And I was just kind of voicing my opinions. And so Yvon goes, hey, Jeff, why don't you tell this guy some of your things you've been telling me, and I just fully unleashed on this guy. And I go, I started with the t-shirts. I go, you guys have like 3 t-shirts, and like some brands, that's their whole thing. Like it's marketing, it's sales, it's everything. And you guys have like 4 of them, and they fit like linebacker shirts. So like this, they're short sleeves, but they go down, they don't even fit well. And it's just like you have a couple. And I go, you guys have the best brand story ever, and you just have a catalog. Like you guys should be doing books and films, and you have the best athletes, and you never really hear about them. You just have maybe a mention in the catalog. You have the best climbers in the world. You have the best brand story in the world, and you don't really see it anywhere. And then I go, and the surf thing, you're just gonna. I have nothing to lose, right?
Of course.
And I just go, I don't think it's gonna work. I heard you guys are gonna launch the new surf thing, and it's just, you guys have failed 3 or 4 times, and it's not gonna work. And he's just like, well, how is it gonna work? And I go, well, you guys need a crew. You guys need a like-minded crew of force that can make this thing happen. You can't just hire one guy and think it's going to happen, And he's like, well, who do you think could do that? And I was like, there's these guys, the Malloy Brothers, the local boys that live here that I think they're kind of burnt on what they're doing, and they make films, I think it'd be the perfect marriage, and I don't even know what I said about that, but I just kind of unloaded that. And he's like, well, what's your deal? Who are you?
Right.
And I'm like, I'm a flight attendant, lifeguard, and you could tell he's kind of tripping on me. And I think Yvon chimes in. He's like, oh, he's taking some pictures. Because at that point I had taken, some of my photographies in their catalogs and stuff. And so I didn't know that this guy was the CEO. I mean, he was just in like a t-shirt and flip-flops, and I thought, I didn't know but Yvon said, hey, tell him your opinions. And I just went off fuck it, I don't care. And so I think that made kind of a little like stir. I think he after all this, he went back to office, like, who are the Malloy Brothers, and who's this guy walking around our offices? And
right.
Yeah, I think he was kind of like, what is going on here? Because the surf thing's a new initiative that he was a new CEO, kind of new.
Got it.
So anyways, it's just such a funny story looking back on it. But yeah, that kind of stirred a thing. And then the marketing department kind of got a buzz, and the guy, Hal Arneson, who used to run the marketing there, the VP of marketing, all that old Patagonia stuff of the baby being tossed over and stuff, that's all Hal Arneson. Like he's kind of the genius behind a lot of the early like 90s kind of marketing. And so anyways, he came up to me when I was wandering around Patagonia. He's like, hey, would the Malloys, I heard the Malloys might be interested, and would they want to talk? I'm like, so I talked to Chris. I'm like, hey, I think shit's going on. Like, I think people are fired up. And so then there's a meeting with the Malloys came down, and the marketing guys, and Fletcher, and Yvon, and everybody. And it was agreed on, hey, let's do this. And I think the Malloys quit. Chris went down to Bob Hurley's office and told him like that week or something. And they quit. And it was like a big kind of buzz in the surf industry at the time, because, why would the Malloys leave this gravy train? They've been with Bob since they were like 15. Why would they leave the gravy train with this like obscure like rock climbing brand in Ventura or whatever? So it's kind of a buzz. And so yeah, they quit Hurley, and then they signed on. And I got on a plane and went home. And to this day, I look back, and it's such a funny time. Like, I don't even know why I was motivated to do that. I was just like, this is such a cool brand. I know what Chris and the Malloys do. Like, this would be, why not? Like, This would be the perfect thing. And I'm such a fanboy of Patagonia. I want to wear some Patagonia shit that I like. Like, I want them to kind of come out of the gates with something new and do something cool. And so anyways, I just got on a plane, but then as I got home, I was like, well, that'd be fun to be involved in that, And I did a flight back from Japan for my flight attendant gig. And I remember I called Chris, and I was just like, dude, I want to be involved. And he's like, well, dude, I just got there. I don't know what to do. Like, he's like, why don't you come over? And I go, I want that to be the last flight I ever do as a flight attendant. And it was. So I got on a flight and flew over, and I think I literally wrote the CEO like a handwritten letter. Might have typed it, but I don't know. I wrote him a letter, And I just said, you know, it's like almost it's going to be like a small company, and you need people that wear a lot of hats. And here's what I can do, and my photography alone will justify my salary. You know, that alone. But then you're going to need a lot of help doing a lot of different things, and the Malloys need somebody they trust and all this stuff. And he and I went for a walk, and then he hired me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so weird, right?
Crazy.
And
but you were living in Hawaii.
I was living in Hawaii.
So you had to relocate?
Yeah, I quit my job, my flight attendant gig, and then moved over. And and I got to give Patagonia kudos for that. You know, like, I mean, that's such out of the box thinking for a company, for a bunch of guys like us to just roll in, you know, and that's why it's cool that it's a privately owned company. The Chouinards can do what they want. And Yvon's like, yeah, let's do this. So it was super exciting for us because, you know, the Malloys at that point had been peddling, you know, product for companies that they're definitely aligned with, but they had nothing to do with the product, you know. And suddenly we had a hand in everything, in the t-shirts, in the actual fit of the t-shirts, and the designs. You know, Chris hired Jeff McFedrich to come in and do a bunch of stuff, and like we had a hand in everything. Like Dan and I were really focused on board shorts, and at the sales meeting, Dan and I would be in board shorts on stage talking. We were so passionate about, and especially Dan, who's like been selling products since he's 15, but he's never had a hand in it. And now we get to work on the product and the marketing, and we were really 100% behind this thing. And for those guys doing that their whole life and finally having this, it was super exciting time for all of us, you know.